They told him to play the violin as a joke, but when he did, the whole room stopped breathing. They didn't even try to hide it. It was fifth period, last row by the window. That's where Barron Trump always sat. Same spot, same silence, same worn violin case, tucked between his knees like it was made of glass. He rarely looked up unless his name was called, and even then he barely said more than what was needed, just another quiet kid trying to stay invisible. But that day, he became the center of attention, and not in the way anyone would want. "All right, folks," said Mr. Buckley, the PE teacher somehow in charge of the school's upcoming talent showcase. "We've got spots open. Singers, dancers, magicians, whatever you got, bring it." His voice carried that usual half-joking, half-serious tone, like he wasn't sure why he was even making the announcement. Then came the moment. Miss Dorsey, the math teacher who always wore the same beige sweater and acted like she ran the building, nudged Mr. Buckley and tilted her head toward Barron's seat. "What about our little violinist over there?" she said, smirking loud enough for half the class to hear. Buckley chuckled without thinking. "Yeah, come on, Trump. Show us what that thing can really do. You've been carrying it around all year. Might as well make it worth the wait." The room burst into laughter. It wasn't the kind of laughter that stings immediately. It crept up slowly, disguised as harmless teasing, but Barron felt it for what it really was. A dare, not encouragement, not respect, just a joke. They assumed he wouldn't understand, or worse, wouldn't mind. His fingers tightened around the neck of his violin case. He didn't look up, not yet. In the row ahead, a boy whispered something about cat screeches. Someone else mimicked a screechy string sound. It spread like spilled paint, messy, fast, impossible to clean up. Miss Dorsey smiled like she'd done something sweet. "Just teasing, sweetheart," she added, brushing it off like it was a feather. That was when Barron finally looked up, straight ahead, not at the teachers, not at the kids, just past them. "I'll do it," he said, flat, calm, like he was ordering food at a drive-thru. The room went dead quiet. Even Buckley blinked. "You serious?" Barron didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. He just slid the violin case off his lap, placed it on the desk, and started filling out the clipboard being passed around. No drama, no eye contact, just his name, Barron Trump, on the line. Miss Dorsey laughed again, but softer now. "Well, that's the spirit, I guess." But behind her smile there was a flicker of something else, doubt, maybe even discomfort. She hadn't expected him to say yes, she expected him to shrink. The rest of the day moved on like it always did. Bell rings, lockers slam, sneakers squeak across the halls, but something had shifted quietly under the surface. Because here's the thing, they didn't know who he was, not really. They saw a quiet kid, the youngest son of a billionaire ex-president, who brought a violin to school like he was trying too hard to be different. They didn't know about the private suite he stayed in at Mar-a-Lago, or how he practiced in a soundproofed room so the staff wouldn't hear. They didn't know that violin wasn't a hobby. It was the one thing he had that felt like his. And now they were all going to see it. But just because he said yes didn't mean he wasn't scared. His name wasn't the kind people forgot, but at Palm Beach Academy, Barron Trump didn't stand out in the hallways. He wasn't loud, he didn't hang out by the vending machines, and he didn't snap back when kids made slick comments under their breath. He just kept walking, violin case always in hand, shoulders a little tight, like he'd gotten used to taking up less space than he deserved. But if you followed him home, if you drove past the palm-lined gates of Mar-a-Lago and stepped into the sprawling estate, you'd see the real Barron, not the boy who barely whispered in class, the boy who lived inside a storm of sound. The violin case clicked open as soon as he shut the door to his room. No snack, no TV, just him, his music, and the marble walls of his private space. His mother's voice echoed faintly from downstairs. "That you, Barron?" "Yeah. You eat anything yet?" "Not hungry?" "You should eat. Don't make me come up there." Barron smiled just a little. His mom, Melania Trump, always said that, and she meant it, but she never came in, not when he was practicing. Melania spent her days managing her own projects, often out of sight until evening. She'd check in around dinner and leave him to his routine. Barron knew she listened from the other side of the door every night. That was the rule. No speakers, no headphones, just raw sound. If Barron was off pitch, if his rhythm broke, she'd tap gently on the wall 3 times. That meant start over. No anger, no shame, just get it right. Again, honey, she'd say, even from the hallway. Most nights, Barron practiced until his fingertips went numb. His violin wasn't fancy. It had scratches from old hands, a loose peg he had to tighten every few minutes, and a bow that frayed at the edges like an old shoelace. But it sang when he played it. It cried. It screamed. It whispered. It was the only way Barron knew how to speak out loud. He had started learning at 7. His grandfather, who'd passed away when he was younger, had played folk tunes on a beat-up fiddle. Barron remembered his laugh, the way his fingers moved like they were dancing, and how he always said, "Let the instrument tell your truth when you can't." So he did. At school, kids rolled their eyes when he pulled out his violin for lunch period practice. Teachers smiled politely but never asked about it. Not until the joke, not until Buckley and Dorsey turned his whole year into a punchline. But Barron had already been working on something, a piece he'd written himself, half classical, half folk, all pain. It had no name. He didn't think it needed one. What it had was feeling, grit, soul, and a secret that only he and his violin understood. Because behind that quiet, behind the tailored jacket and polished shoes, Barron Trump was a storm, and for the first time he wasn't going to hold it in. But wanting to prove something is one thing. Actually standing in front of the whole school and doing it, that was another. The next morning, the sign-up sheet was posted by the front office window, right next to the old vending machine that never worked. Kids huddled around it, fingers dragging down the list, scanning for names they recognized, hoping for drama, hoping someone would embarrass themselves. Barron's name sat quietly at number 16. Some squinted like they thought it was a mistake. "Who's Barron Trump?" someone asked, chewing the end of a pencil. "He's that kid with the violin," another said. "Never talks, probably going to play Mary Had a Little Lamb and cry." Laughter again, always laughter after. But Barron didn't flinch. He walked past them like he didn't hear it. Truth was, he heard every word, memorized it, folded it up, and put it in his chest like fuel. At lunch, Mr. Buckley stood by the basketball courts, pretending to care who signed up. "Talent shows on Friday," he called out. "No turning back now." He spotted Barron at the edge of the yard, tuning his violin in his lap. "You ready, Trump?" he called with a grin. Barron gave him a look that wasn't mean, wasn't friendly either, just blank, like he wasn't worth the energy it would take to answer. Buckley raised his eyebrows and turned away. Inside the teacher's lounge, Miss Dorsey sipped her coffee, flipping through a list of performances. "Seriously, who let him sign up?" she asked, motioning to Barron's name. "He signed up himself," said Mrs. Tran, the art teacher. "He's got the same right as the rest." Miss Dorsey shook her head. "It's not about rights, it's about awareness. He's setting himself up. You really think he's going to stand on stage and not fall apart?" "I think maybe he surprises you," Mrs. Tran said, then turned back to her crossword. Miss Dorsey didn't reply, but something in her jaw said she wasn't ready to admit she might be wrong. That afternoon, Barron sat on the edge of his bed in his Mar-a-Lago suite with his violin and a blank notebook. Melania leaned against the doorframe, wiping her hands on a silk scarf. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. Barron nodded without looking up. "I already said yes." She walked in and sat beside him, picking up the frayed bow. "You don't got to prove nothing to people who don't even see you. You know that, right?" "I'm not doing it for them." "Then who?" Barron thought for a second, eyes drifting to the chandelier above. "I guess me." Melania smiled, pulled him close. "Then do it right." At school, whispers grew louder as the week went on. Kids started making bets. Some said he'd chicken out, others said he'd freeze. A few even said maybe he could actually play, but still laughed when they said it. Only one person really talked to him, Malik, a soft-spoken 7th grader who played piano after school. He caught up with Barron near the library. "You doing original or something famous?" Barron blinked. "Original," Malik smiled. "Good. Do something they can't compare to nothing else. Barron didn't smile back, but he nodded once. That was enough. Friday came fast. The stage was set up in the gym, fold-out chairs, scuffed floors, squeaky mic. Parents would arrive later, but for now it was students and teachers only. One by one the acts went up, singers, dancers, a kid who told knock-knock jokes. The crowd clapped, some polite, some fake. Phones were out, everything was being recorded. Everyone waited for someone to fall. Barron sat backstage with his violin across his lap, fingers tapping the wood like Morse code. Number 16, his number. But when they called his name and he stood up, no one expected what came next. The private suite at Mar-a-Lago always smelled like polished wood and ocean air. That's what Barron came home to every day. That and silence, except for the sound he made himself. As soon as his backpack hit the floor, he pulled out his violin. No snacks, no scrolling through his phone, no time for that, just music. Practice, over and over again. The piece he planned to play didn't have a name. It didn't need one. It started soft, just a few notes that sounded like something slipping out from under a locked door. Then came the shift, that sudden pull that made people sit up straight. That's what he worked hardest on, the transition. His grandfather used to say, "Make them feel like they've been dragged through something real, then give them peace at the end." He played barefoot on the plush carpet, his toes curling whenever he hit a note wrong. He didn't use sheet music. Everything was inside his head and his hands. They moved like they'd been doing this for 20 years, but it wasn't easy. His bow was splitting at the ends, and the E string buzzed if he pressed too hard. The bridge leaned just slightly to the left. Every couple of hours, he had to retune the whole thing from scratch. Still, he didn't complain. His younger cousin, miles away, had once asked over a video call, "You going to win?" Barron shrugged without stopping. "Why don't you play happy songs?" the kid added. Barron paused, looking at the screen. "I do. They sound like crying sometimes." "Happy and sad sound the same," he said. The kid didn't get it, but nodded anyway and signed off. Melania came in around midnight, dropping her keys on the counter downstairs. She'd been out all day. Her heels clicked faintly as she climbed the stairs. "You still at it?" Barron was stretched out on the floor, his violin beside him like a sleeping pet. "Almost done." She stepped over him and disappeared into her room. When she came back out, she had a damp towel and sat beside him, pressing it against his hands. "You push too hard, your hands will give out," she warned. "They already feel numb." "Exactly." They sat there in quiet, not awkward silence, just the kind you earn after knowing someone forever. "You sure about tomorrow?" Barron didn't even blink. "Yeah." Melania looked at her son, the way his eyes didn't flinch, the way his shoulders didn't shake even though his fingers did. "Okay then, make 'em listen." The morning of the show, Barron didn't eat much, just a dry slice of toast and some water. His hands were stiff, but he stretched them out over and over again on the way to school. When he got there, the gym smelled like too much floor polish and too many bodies packed into folding chairs. He peeked behind the curtain. People were already there. Whole classes, teachers, staff, even the assistant principal standing near the back with a clipboard. And phones, everywhere. It wasn't nerves that hit him, it was heat. His face flushed, his fingers shook, his stomach flipped. 16, someone whispered from backstage. "He's number 16. The whisper felt louder than it was. Barron found a corner and sat down with his violin across his knees. He closed his eyes. He didn't think about Buckley or Dorsey or the kids waiting to laugh. He thought about his mom's towel-wrapped hands, about his grandfather's words. "Make 'em feel it." That's all he had to do, but it only takes 1 second, one crack in your voice or one slip of the bow, to lose everything. They called his name like they were unsure how to say it. "Next up, Barron Trump." The room didn't clap right away. Just a few awkward taps, some murmurs, a cough, a sneaker squeaking against the gym floor. Barron stood from his chair backstage like he was being pulled by an invisible string, violin in one hand, bow in the other. Step by step, he moved toward the stage. Kids in the front row elbowed each other. Some had their phones out already. He stopped in the center, no microphone, just a single light buzzing overhead and a cheap folding chair someone had dragged out for him. He didn't sit. He didn't say anything. He just lifted the violin to his shoulder. And then, nothing. A few seconds passed. Mr. Buckley cleared his throat somewhere near the stage door. Miss Dorsey leaned forward in her seat like she was waiting for the punchline. In the audience, someone muttered, "He's choking." But then he played. The first note was thin, barely there. It trembled in the air like it was scared to be heard. But he held it, stretched it, and let it bloom. By the time he reached the fifth note, the gym was completely still. No more whispering, no more giggling, just Barron. The piece didn't sound like anything they'd heard before. It wasn't a song from TikTok or some movie score. It was deeper, raw. His bow danced across the strings like he was trying to say something with his whole body. At first, it was slow, deliberate, like a conversation between someone hurt and someone healing. Then, halfway through, it shifted. He bent the strings like they were crying out, his left hand moving fast across the neck. The sound twisted, pulled, surged, like something fighting to break loose. His eyes were closed, not because he was nervous, because he didn't need them open. Everything he wanted to say was coming through the strings. The moment he hit the highest note, he held it so long the air felt heavy. People forgot to breathe. Even Buckley, who'd been scrolling through his phone moments earlier, was locked in. A few teachers leaned forward, confused, maybe even ashamed. Dorsey didn't say a word. When the piece started to slow, Barron dragged the final note out like a thread unraveling. It didn't fade, it lingered. And when it ended, he didn't move. He just stood there, still, bow down, violin resting against his chest like a heartbeat. The gym was dead quiet. And then, slowly, one clap from the back, then another, then a few more, then the whole room. No one was yelling, no one was laughing. They were clapping like they didn't know how else to respond. Some kids looked down at their phones, ashamed they'd even recorded him, expecting a train wreck. Mullick, seated near the middle, stood up first. Then a few more followed, and finally the ones who'd said he'd chicken out stood too. When Barron walked off stage, he didn't smile, he didn't cry. He didn't need to. He just held the violin a little tighter. Backstage, Buckley nodded at him like he was trying to act like he'd always believed in him, but he didn't say anything. Neither did Dorsey. She looked like she was chewing on her own silence. "Mrs." Tran met him by the water fountain and handed him a folded piece of paper. "You made them feel it," she said, soft. Barron opened it when he got to the hallway. It was just a short note. "When they don't expect you to shine, shine anyway." Later that night, Melania was waiting by the front door of their suite. She didn't even ask how it went. She just looked at Barron's face and nodded. "You did it?" "Yeah." "Did they listen?" "Yeah." She wrapped her arms around him and whispered into his hair, "I hope they never forget." But applause fades, and the real change comes after the clapping stops. Monday came with overcast skies and the smell of wet pavement, the kind of weather that usually made people move slower, quieter, but not this time. As soon as Barron stepped through the school's front doors, something was different. People looked at him, not with side eyes or smirks, but with curiosity, with respect. Some nodded, a few just moved out of his way. One girl even whispered, "That's him," like she was talking about someone famous. It wasn't fame, though. It was recognition, the kind Barron had never asked for but now couldn't avoid. He walked past Mr. Buckley in the hallway. Buckley tried to flash a friendly smile, phone still in hand. "Hey, amazing job Friday," he said, awkward. Barron gave a small nod and kept walking. Then came Miss Dorsey. She was standing at her door, holding a stack of worksheets like always. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just looked at Barron like she was searching for a version of him she hadn't bothered to see before. "Mr. Trump," she said, careful, "can I have a word?" Barron stopped but didn't move closer. Dorsey cleared her throat. "I owe you an apology. What I said last week wasn't right." A long pause. Barron just looked at her. "I shouldn't have made assumptions. I'm still learning. Barron thought about saying something sharp, something he'd had locked and loaded since that first laugh, but he didn't. Instead, he looked her in the eye and said, "You should have seen me before Friday." Dorsey blinked. That hit harder than a comeback ever could. Barron turned and walked away. He wasn't bitter, he wasn't angry. He was just done being ignored. In the cafeteria, Malik slid him a carton of chocolate milk without saying a word. He grinned. "Next time, we play a duet." Barron smirked, then rolled his eyes. "You're not ready." The sound of his laugh, even just that little bit, turned a few heads. It was the first time most had ever heard it. At home that evening, he didn't pick up his violin right away. He sat on the couch in the suite, watching the ocean through the window with the sound off. Melania peeked out from her office. "You not practicing?" "Not tonight," Barron said. "You good?" He thought for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm good." Not everyone clapped because they cared. Not everyone who stood that day changed overnight, but some did, and sometimes that's enough to start something. Some people won't see you until you force them to listen, so play your truth anyway. If you've ever been doubted, overlooked, or laughed at, remember, Barron. Remember that silence is powerful, but your voice, in whatever form it takes, is louder. Tell your story. Let them hear it. Don't let their doubts define you. Like Barron, pick up your violin, your voice, your truth, and play it loud. Stand tall when they laugh, shine brighter when they doubt. Your story matters, and the world needs to hear it. So step up, take the stage, and make them listen, starting today.